Hey guys, this is how Delaware has more corporations than people. When you think of tax havens, you probably think about a Swiss bank or maybe an offshore account in the Caymans. What you probably don't think about is good old Delaware, the 48th least visited state. Delaware is actually one of the biggest tax havens in the world. Over 50% of US companies that are publicly traded are registered in the state of Delaware. These companies include Apple, Google, as well as Coca-Cola. You know, little companies that no one's ever heard of. With just over 1 million registered corporations, Delaware actually has more companies than people. My favorite part of this entire story, though, is the fact that over 300,000 of those corporations are all under a single roof of the Corporation Trust Center in Wilmington, Delaware. There's nothing really special about this location. It's a simple 2-story brick building, which begs the question, how do so many corporations all share one roof? Well, of course, the answer is they don't. At least not really. These are shell companies, which are businesses that only exist on paper. For example, they have no employees, no stock of products. It's all just on, well, lots and lots of 300,000 pieces of paper.
It just says business resides here?
That's it. That's all you need.
All right.
Since shells can be used to hide the activity of the parent company, oftentimes people associate a shell corporation with some slightly more nefarious purposes. It's difficult to trace exactly who owns the assets in a shell, and because of this, it has been taken advantage of by organized criminals and people who want to do things like, I don't know, embezzle or money launder or not pay taxes. There are legitimate reasons to use a shell to hide a business. Apple, for example, who are of course notoriously secretive, have used this tactic before to make sure that a new product that's being announced is still kept secret. For example, in 2010, the iPad was registered to IP Application Development LLC, or conveniently, iPad for short. Also, fun fact, the official email on that original application was just a normal Gmail, which kind of goes to show just exactly how much they don't care when you create a Delaware corporation and you hide a super secret tablet of the future there. Other legitimate uses of a Delaware corporation include, say, if you're doing a merger and you want to make sure that you move assets from one company to another, but for the most part, they're used for one very specific purpose: not paying taxes. Google, for example, is of course based in California, but because they're a Delaware corporation, they then pay Delaware taxes, which are much, much cheaper than the taxes you would normally pay inside California. I know this because we're based in California, and now that we're doing this video, I'm getting some ideas about Not Paying Taxes LLC based in Delaware. That's gonna go over well, I think. There are a number of other tax havens out there, including stuff like the Cayman Islands. So the question is, why is Delaware so popular? The simple answer is that Delaware is very, very friendly to businesses. Every state tries to make it as simple as possible to register for a corporation, but Delaware goes the extra mile and allows you to do it in just about an hour. You actually need, fun fact, more information to register for a California library card than you do to register an entire corporation in Delaware. Most importantly of all, Delaware charges little to no tax on a company's quote-unquote intangible assets. This includes things such as trademarks and intellectual property, you know, stuff that only exists on paper, kinda like a shell corporation. So say we want to move This Is to Delaware. The first thing we would do is create a shell corporation in Delaware and transfer over our assets such as the This Is trademark. Matt, can we get This Is trademarked?
I'll get on it.
Cool. The parent company, which is of course based here in California, can then pay royalties to the Delaware corporation for the use of the This Is trademark. Pretty simple so far, right? Where this really pays off is that our Delaware corporation has to pay little to no tax on the income from that IP, and our California corporation then gets to write off on the taxes everything that is spent giving to the Delaware corporation. This is a great loophole, right? And you see why creative accounting is so valuable. Also, disclaimer, don't follow any of this stuff, and if you do, just pay extra taxes or something, because that's probably safe, and don't do this. Because of this loophole, states have lost out on billions of dollars of tax revenues. Now, of course, no one likes to pay taxes, but I will say that I'm kind of a big fan of having like roads and schools and stuff. This is all in a legal gray area. So none of it is technically illegal, but it has certainly faced a lot of legal scrutiny. In 1993, South Carolina sued Toys R Us over using this exact same loophole, and they won. And yeah, Toys R Us back in the 90s. Not Apple, not Google, none of the multi-billion-dollar corporations of today. It was good old Jeffrey and Jeffrey LLC. But I guess we all know how that one ended. Since then, other states have worked to cut down on the Delaware loophole, but as of right now, well, Matt, I think it's time to move This Is to Delaware. Right?
At least on paper.